We don't have any gifts for the panelists, in case you're wondering why I didn't call upon anybody to give it. Yeah. So, Swathi? Yes, please go ahead.
All right. So, good afternoon, everyone. All right, I'm just waiting for people to settle down. In case anybody is interested, please come over. Okay, they're going back. All right, so I'm Swathi Jain, and I'm working as an information architect and a UA team lead at IBM. And welcome to this session about innovation for customer focus. We are in this age of simplicity where less is more. So gone are the days when we would force or rather ask our customers or users to refer to the conventional traditional help system which had the elaborate conceptual task and reference information and ask them to learn about the product or the tool. So as as information developer, how do we develop customer-centric user assistants that are smarter, that are also have improved user experience? So as an information developer, what kind of content strategy can we adopt that focuses more on improving the user experience of a customer and deliver these kind of information that are much more user-friendly and much more user-consumable? So how can we develop this kind of innovative contents that are tailored to meet all the customer requirements so that they're also available through different formats and different channels? So let's just look at this agenda. So what we're going to do is we're going to just review some of the information deliverables that we generally tend to deliver and look into some of the issues that we generally face, which are faced by the customers, and the kind of feedback that we get for these kind of information deliverables. So we'll look into some of the innovative methods that we at IBM have adopted, and I'll just give you some tips on things that you can consider while adopting some of these kind of best practices. We look into also some of the trends that's being shown by the customers. They're demanding for different kind of information, and what are the ways that we can develop and deliver these kind of information to the customers. And I'll also just touch upon some social media collaboration points as well. So let's look into the kind of general information deliverables that we do. They're the normal installation, configuration, administrator guides. They can be context-sensitive help, the general, the concept, task, reference kind of information that we generally give along with the help system. We also go ahead and do API reference guides, and there's this white papers, which I guess some of them might venture into it, and then write about best practices, and then most of them have ventured into providing different kind of product tools, tutorials, some FAQs, sample projects, and so on. So now let's just look into some of the issues that we are currently looking where customers are really facing problems. Now, one major issue that customers are having is obviously with the user experience itself. So because they do have lots of issues when they interact with the user, that's the time, of course, they refer to the manuals. But have we thought about how much of frustration the end users face in while interacting with the product or while using the product for doing their normal day-to-day job? So I've just pasted some snippets which shows the amount of frustration that a customer generally faces while using a system or using a software. And it goes to a stage where they're even ready to just point a gun to a system and saying, okay, now you're going to just work the way I want you to do. So these are some of the issues, and I've just put a snippet over here where Dilbert goes and just complains to his boss, says that our users are not able to figure out how to use the UI, and the boss says, yes, just point them to the user manuals. User manuals are there, but they're very confusing. All right, fine, then just go and point them to the support portal. And Dilbert says, yeah, the support portal database is much more confusing than the user manuals. So obviously, what's the solution then? How do you enhance the customer experience so that they don't have these kind of issues? Now, the second one, I found it a bit more funny, is the developer's theory is to ensure that whatever UI that they develop is hurting the user to the maximum. They just ensure that they put all kinds of screeching sounds and so on. If at all they end up doing some error. So this is just a few comic snippets, but overall these all just show the amount of frustration that a user would have while interacting with the user interface. So this is something that we are doing at IBM right now. It's something called as progressive disclosure. So what you can see is classically or traditionally the user interface generally would have some amount of information about what a user would do in a particular UI or within a window or something. So what we are trying to do is providing them with the right information at the right place and at the right time. So that is what progressive disclosure is about. Progressive disclosure is not something like a new idea, but we are trying to give them the information in a progressive manner, and they get just the right context to that particular goal which the user is trying to do at that level. So overall, this is just an example which, it might be a bit repeat, particularly this window which Ninita has already shown this in her session in the morning. But overall, what you can see is there are just 3 radio button options in this window. And, a classical, general, traditional way that UI is done is just those 3 options are shown, and that's it. There's absolutely no clue on why you're selecting that or what you're supposed to do. So, but here what you can see is a very brief description or concise information on what you're trying to do in this particular window. And there are also the optional description on for each of the option what you're trying to do. In case a user is still in case they want more information, they have an option to click more, and they're not really getting distracted or diverted to another completely different help system. Instead, the window itself gets expanded and it shows a bit more information on that particular field or on that particular goal that whatever they're trying to achieve here. So the context on the right side gets updated or changed based on whatever option they select in the UI. So it's progressively you're showing the information, and it's on-demand info for that particular goal, whatever they're trying to do in this particular window. Now this is another just an example of it. So obviously here this is something like work in progress, but overall what they're trying to do is just give them a basic information on what they're trying to achieve, and it's all there within that particular UI itself, and the field validations happen right away, so they know exactly what format to put in these kind of field input text. They don't have to again refer to another reference manual just to go and find out what's the format that's supported, what kind of characters are supported, what kind of validation happens, and so on. So but instead those kind of information are already populated in the UI. The validation happens then and there, and there's no requirement for a user to get distracted from the user interface and go beyond that to check for more information. This is a classical one, which I thought this is one of the best, one more way where a user really gets. So most of the times, when we encounter with the error, what happens is we ultimately just get one error code and a basic error. Sorry, you have done this error. That's about it. No, there's no description about why the error has happened, what's the solution for it, but instead they're asked to, refer to the user guide, which has the complete set of error codes, description, solution, and so on. But again, just imagine the amount of frustration a user would feel if you're going to encounter error and they have to go to some other place to refer to what's the solution and so on and how to troubleshoot this issue. So I think, we need to think about the ways we can help the user right at that point, and the way this can be instead done is right at that place, just show them what the error is, what's the reason for your error, and what are the possible solutions. Now the solution shouldn't be again just saying do this, but instead give them intuitive way of a proper solution which gives a link to that particular UI or a menu or something that will help them to resolve that particular solution, so that they're not really diverted away from the UI. So this is another way that you can implement. So it obviously these kind of scenarios you don't even need to go and again create a different troubleshooting documentation, but instead these kind of errors are already tackled within the user interface itself. So these are just some examples on ways that you can improve the user experience for a user while interacting with your product or a tool. And so what is this? This whole thing, we call it as progressive disclosure. And as I said before, this is not something like a new idea or anything. It's just an interaction design methodology. So what we are doing is we're trying to reveal the information in a very ordered manner. And the basic concept about this is for an information developer is to think more and write less. So it's not about writing elaborate reference information and so on, but you have to see what's the context, what's the goal that the user is trying to achieve, and then put the right information at the right place and at the right time. So obviously all this kind of information that you're going to create and put it or provide it, it's something that you need to do collaboratively with the development team. So get involved right away at the phase where you're going to participate during the design discussion, and that's when you need to get into that, find out what kind of gaps are there in terms of the user goals and the user task flows, and find questions, ask questions about what you really don't know. Maybe if you're stuck at that particular time, that means even an end user would get stuck at that particular time. So find the ways how you can improve the user experience without having to add topics. In fact, you can reduce your work in terms of adding different kind of reference topics for these kind of information that you can provide it within the user interface. Don't make it too elaborate or something. You have to get into the concise writing mode over here. So determine the focus. Now, if there's so many things that a user needs to know which cannot be really, improved through within the user interface, find out what's the best medium to deliver these kind of information. See if only examples would suffice, or maybe a sample would suffice, or maybe a tutorial is required or something, and only focus on delivering those kind of contents. Don't have to go and create all types of formats, all type of documentation deliverable just for one user interface or for one user goal. So ultimately you'll have to focus on the user task and not on the UI task. So let's look into some other information deliverables that we do. So we finished the CS help and the reference topics on, and found out what kind of ways you can see to enhance them. Other stuff that we generally do are the normal install guide, the administrator guide, and the configuration guide. Have you ever wondered how these kind of guides are really being consumed by the customers? So obviously we all know we are very happy to create the install guides. You go and generate around 400, 500 pages of these kind of document, and not a single click OK, click next, or anything is missed out. You have tried out every possible combinations, you have written all the possible topics, and there's nothing that's really missing from the install guide. But we still end up getting so many customer support calls just asking about how do I set this up? I did this, but somewhere I got stuck, but I'm not sure how I'm going to proceed and so on. Because most of our softwares are quite complex. There are tons of pre-installation steps that you need to do. There are tons of stuff that you do during the installation, and there are lots of stuff that you need to do post-install. And again, the complexity increases with all the combinations that you're going to support. For example, if you're going to support 10 operating systems, there are so many database setups that you need to do. There are so many server setup that you need to do. There's tons of, obviously the pre-install, post-install, and maybe your install wizard is the simplest, but there are so many things that you need to do pre-install and post-install, which is going to cause lots of frustration and confusion to the user. So how are we going to set this up? How are we going to help these users just to get the required information based on their environment? So this is like a major common problem which I guess most of them do face, and this is something that even we have faced over the years, and we've seen most of the customer complaints. Yes, I know your information deliverable, your IC, your information IC is information center or knowledge center. It has all the information, but we don't know which one we need to select, which are the topics that are really relevant. And that's when we came out with this small solution where we provided with the interactive install guide form. So what we did is created a form and asked the customer to just select what their environment was. So obviously each of the products had different configurations, and each of them had different scenarios. So in this particular scenario, whatever screenshot I pasted is about a product called Rational Focal Point, and here the major concern was with the upgrade scenarios. So there were different versions of the product, and there were different upgrade paths for each of these versions. So that was where we received lots of customer complaints. And in terms of the support, it was just for, based on their application server and the database, the topics were differing or the information was differing. So ultimately what we did is we came out with this kind of form and just asked the user to just provide with the information. They just had to select the option, and then when they click generate, it would just retrieve only the topics that are relevant to that particular setup. So they don't need to really skim through the entire guide to find which particular topic is applicable for them. So this is another one. It's a very huge stuff. That's why I really didn't manage to get a very clear screenshot on this. But this is another offering that we have called as CLM, and it had lots of components. It had lots of combinations of database, server, and again, based on the operating system, a few options were enabled in terms of servers were supported or not supported and so on. So these kind of combinations were handled through the form itself. So all the user had to do was just select the options, and then they just had to click generate, and then it would just generate one big HTML file which had all the links to all the topics. All the topics were just set up very clearly, step-by-step instructions were given over there, and they could just blindly follow it, and they could just achieve the goal of installing and setting up within a few minutes. But this was a huge, tremendous task, even for for a person to write about it. But what we did is, it might look a bit more complex, and what it really contains is ultimately it's just a Dojo toolkit framework that we have, and which had some style sheets, and ultimately we just had one HTML file, that's a roadmap form file, and there was one JavaScript file over there. So this was created by another information developer from our team itself, and though he wasn't a programmer or anything, but he's the one who just created with this basic framework, and all the writers had to do was just take this entire framework. We had to just edit these kind of roadmap form files, just so that it fits into that particular environment, or the tool whichever they were supporting, and a small JavaScript file which had all the combinations or the IDs that we were supposed to specify, and the topics that were supposed to be retrieved for each of those selections that the form were showing up. So this is something that was done by an information developer, and I would say that this is something that even anybody can do it. And in fact, even if you're not very comfortable with the JavaScripting or anything, you can even approach your dev team or something and ask them to just create a small form, the basic form and the basic style sheet, which you can yourself do it, a form and one JavaScript file which they can do it for you, and you can just edit it based on your set up and provided. But overall, it's just one form that's shown right at the help system, and it just retrieves the topics that are relevant to that setup. So this is one such kind of very simple, innovative ways. And things to consider while doing this is, you need to ensure that your topics are modular enough. You cannot have, if your form shows, for example, Windows, Linux, and so on, and you cannot have a topic that's based on Linux to be retrieved over Windows. So, you cannot have one common topic for both Windows and Linux. So ensure that, your topics are modular so that they get the right information, and you don't really need to stress out the user to filter out the contents while reading. So step 1, applicable only for Windows. Step 2, applicable only for Linux. This is not a very good user experience. Anybody reading through these kind of guides would really get frustrated. So ensure that your topics are modular, design your form very clearly, and the form should take care of disabling any of the fields or any of the stuff that is not supported for that particular combination, and work on the scripts. So the other stuff that, I'm not sure if you're all generally getting to this kind of situation where right at the last minute, you have your product management team still discussing about how many more features can we cram in just before the release. Or, there's another snippet that I saw, we got a very good innovative solution, everything is working, but we're not sure about what's the exact problem that we're trying to address it with. So have you been in this situation where, what's the big idea? Okay, the developer comes and says, oh yeah, we developed these 2 features, this is how it works and so on. But then where's the story? What's the big scenario? How does this fit into your modules? How am I supposed to convey this to the end user on how in their scenario it's going to fit in? Have you been in such kind of situation, which I guess most of us are generally, get into these kind of situations, and developers are just point blank about it. They just know how the coding to be done. They just know how the feature what's the feature that they need to develop, but they don't know how exactly it fits into the bigger picture. So this is something that, we have seen, even the customers asking, yes, I do understand these are your features, but how does this fit into our scenario? How am I supposed to follow this? What's the capability that it's going to try to address? And how does it, where do I start? Where do I end? And so on. So these are the general issues, or these are the general feedback that we get from the customer. What they need to know is the bigger picture. So they want to know how exactly your components are fitting in into each other. For example, this is just an example. We had 3 tools, and then they said, the developer said, yeah, we have this OSLC CM RM specification, CM specification, and so on. Why have you supported, why have you started supporting this REST APIs and the OSLC CM and so on? They say, yeah, we are supporting all this so that you can integrate our tool with this tool to this tool A to tool B and so on. But ultimately, yes, you are able to integrate. But what are you trying to do after integrating? What's the use case? What's the story flow? So these are the kind of information that you will not get through a developer, but you'll have to work with the product management, with the development management, and maybe even with your customers just to find what is the scenario in which this kind of tools are integrated, and what's the main capability you're trying to address. So these kind of docs are something that we have seen over a period of time. Customers are asking for these kind of information. They're not happy. They don't want the normal conceptual task reference. They want to get a bigger picture on how it really fits in. So what we try to find is, the ways that you can provide this kind of information is through overview illustrations that you can create, which generally gets into the marketing slides and sales team and so on, which is generally, seen only through the higher management people, but ultimately it just doesn't trickle down to the end user of your product or the tool, and neither would you get these kind of information. But these kind of information is required by the end users, and this is something that like a new information type or your topics needs to be enhanced to provide these kind of information. So this is just an example about that. Overall, we are providing the illustration overview illustratively, and if you go beyond a little bit further down, we are just showing again the entire workflow on what you're doing, where you're going to start, where you're going to end, how is this particular component getting affected, what kind of functionalities are working, and so on. So it just goes a bit in depth on saying, in this particular scenario, we're showing first you're going to use tool B, do this, do that, export this one, this goes into there, this is what you can do. We're also listing out the roles and the personas, who can use this particular feature, what kind of capability it's going to help you to do. And obviously, with all this kind of information, what you're trying to address is providing with a very high-level business case scenario. You're providing them with the information about how each of the components are fitting with each other, and what kind of roles or personas are, have access to do that kind of functionality, and what are the usage scenarios. So these are the trends. We have seen increase in number of people asking for these kind of information, and this is something that you'll have to enhance and think about how what are the ways you can develop these kind of information and provide it to the customer. So this is one more example, but overall it's just a big picture itself. We have just delved a bit deeper. So once you had an overview, and then we went into capability, and then we started with the workflows, and we started saying, yes, now we're going to start here, and then each of these are again big task topics, but most of them would just like to have a bird's eye view on where you are, what you're supposed to do, and so on. So these are just a few examples of it. Now this is another way that we have tried to give this kind of information. We call it as interactive workflows, and it exactly shows point A, where you get started and where you end, and it also tries to address what's the conditions, what's the cases, and it takes you to those topics that addresses these in depth on how you really address this. But overall, the topics are user oriented, and each of them just takes you to that particular place which helps you to do that particular one. Overall, people, we have seen many of them are interested with these kind of workflows. They just want to know where to get started, how do you end, and what's the flow that they need to follow, what's the parallel and the sequential task flows that you need to follow. So overall, again, the same thing. You're trying to go at a bit lower use case scenario, and you're giving them what are your goal objectives, what are the flows, and each of them are linked to the detailed tasks. This is one set of statistics. So what we did is I just managed to just find out how much of views do we get for those traditional help system, and how much of views do we get for articles that are published on our portal called DevWorks. So we do have an entire knowledge center where we publish all our information centers of the help system, and we also have something called as developer work portal, where in this particular portal there are lots of communities, forums, and so on. Other than that, there are also lots of articles written by different people. It can be developers, it can be ours, user assistant team members, it can also be our users themselves, customers themselves, where they just write articles on their first-hand experience on where they started, how they did it, what's the best practice, and so on. And what's amazing is we see at least, this is just from Jan to September statistics, and we get at least around 16 lakhs of view on just these articles, and that's only for Rational, by the way. And only for Rational KC, of course, we get around 1.60 crore of views just for Rational help system that we have. But what we can see is here 10% of people or 10% of users, in fact these views are increasing, are still looking out for articles that are published over the net, I mean particularly in this particular portal, and they are interested to see different kind of information, and it's not enough for them to just refer through the help manuals. So what we have seen is there's more of demand for tutorials, and they also want articles which are based on best practices. Also they prefer to see first-hand experiences. So if a customer has tried out a particular product, tried out a particular new feature or enhancement, they just want to see what's their experiences with that, and what kind of tips and tricks they have, what kind of FAQs, and is there any sample projects available, and so on. So these are the kind of information that a customer or a user is looking out for, and we need to ensure that we are trying to tackle these kind of issues where customers might not find these kind of articles or information within your help system, but ensure that you create this kind of information and make them available to your customer. So I'm just going to elaborate a bit more on tutorials because that's something that is of more demand. So tutorials is something that you can design. There can be different types of tutorials that you can design, which can be a do and learn, which is more of asking the user to try out each and every task. So when you design these kind of tutorials, ensure that you get a real world scenario, a scenario where from point A to point B, the complete flow is addressed, and anybody who's just trying out your tutorial, even blindly just trying out the steps, they should get the exact result, exact setup as you recommend in the tutorial. So you have to take one particular scenario or something which a user can follow, and where they can map it to the scenario that they are trying to accomplish with the usage of the tool, and see that you can create these kind of tutorials. You can supplement these kind of tutorial tasks or something with the videos as well. And what you can do is, when you design these tutorials, in case there's a scenario where the administrator needs to do something, and then they need to add some users, provide some access rights, and then the next phase is for a normal user to do some kind of task in a particular way in that particular scenario, then ensure that you create different modules for each of them, so that module 1 is tried out by the administrator who's going to set up and configure, and module 2 is set up for a different persona. They're trying out their use cases, and they understand the whole flow about how they use the product. But these are the kind of stuff that users are looking out for, and find ways on innovative ways on how you can deliver these kind of tutorials. It needn't be very much limited to or confined to providing this do and learn. You can also create different types of tutorials, like video-based tutorials, or maybe a do and learn tutorial itself can have small show me videos that is for more of customers or users who are really lazy to try it out, but they would prefer to just watch it out. So these are some of the steps that you want to. Okay, fine. All right, so I'm just giving you some more options over here. So what we do is we create this do and learn tutorial, but what we also do is populate them with the videos. So if anybody wants to just have a look at how it exactly works without having the tool or something, they do have an option to just watch and learn as well. These are some of the things that we are doing. So we do create lots of videos. Videos can be conceptual videos, or very product high level overview videos, or task based videos or something, which we generally create. We put them into YouTube. We have our own channels, we have our own playlists, and we just embed those in our help topics. Embed means the video is not really provided with our in our server or anything. It's just we're just giving a link to that, but you can play it out, and it just it plays within our help system or within our UI, but the video really resides in the YouTube. So these are some of the ways that you all can do it, and it's just some statistics that shows how video is getting popular, the kind of demands that we have for the videos, and this is very few stuff. So mainly because videos are something that quickly grabs attention, and there are lots of statistics which reveals and which shows that it helps a user to learn quicker, and also it boosts their retention and recall. And very high level, very brief steps on the steps that you need to consider while creating videos. Identify what your requirements are, acquire whatever tools are. There are quite a few open source tools which you can still go download them, use them, and see how you can create them. And the most essential part while creating a video is to build a storyboard. Now the storyboard is has to go to a certain extent where you think about each slide what you want to cover. You know, make it as concise as possible, make it as small as possible in terms of videos. Find out what your requirements is, but you know, you're creating educational video and not entertainment video. So don't go and create some 30 minutes, 20 minutes video. Nobody has that much of attention span. Nobody would really like to see these kind of videos. Try to get your videos maximum not beyond 10 minutes, because nobody would want to see a video which extends beyond 10 minutes, particularly the educational ones. Get them as much as, you know, shorter as possible. If it's a conceptual video, create a different one, but, you know, conceptual video shouldn't really go beyond 1 or 2 minutes, in fact. You know, the task-based can maybe go a bit, you know, lengthy, but it has to have exactly the tasks. It has to exactly have the flows, show them where they are, what they're trying to do, and so on. And then once you create the video, don't just go and create some video and just publish it. Ensure that they are having enough of audio as well. Nobody wants to watch a video without the audio, unless you know, unless you have those call outs or anything. But you know, people are used to the videos with the audio, so ensure that you also record the audio, merge it along with the video, and deliver this video in whichever servers you want, in whichever formats you want. But you can think about publishing it through YouTube. Create your own channel, be a curator to that, and then create your own playlist and popularize that content through the social media as well. So it is time for us as well to get in touch with the end users or the customers through this community, social media forums. It can be through blogs or wikis or internet forums and communities, but you know, you don't have to confine yourself to the silos of, you know, just creating some basic help information. This is not going to work out. You have to get out of this and then get into the mode of user experience, see how proactively you can interact with your customers, what value add you can give, and you know, even the customers prefer to interact directly with the people who are working behind the scenes, so that they get the direct information, the technical information, whatever kind of information they would prefer to get directly from people who are really working behind the scenes. So that's about it. And if you have any questions, I'm not sure, do I have time for questions?
Can put it here.